to a town called Yarn, obviously not a real town. My name's Harrison and this is episode 16 of my Knitting and Crochet podcast, where I like to talk about knitting and crochet. I live in the southeast, no I don't, I live in like the central south of England. And this is our last one of these for the year, which has come around so quickly. I think part of the reason why this year's felt like it's gone so quickly is because I've been making these videos. I make them every other week, so that's kind of been my signifier for a passage of time. But here we are at episode 16. If you have watched any of these videos since like May this year, or if you're brand new, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you have. We just got over 400 subscribers, which is wonderful. But if you're new here and this is your first video, good news, there's loads more to watch if you want to go back and watch any of the other videos over the Christmas period. But also subscribing would be wonderful. And if you enjoy this, leaving a like on the video would also be wonderful. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because I haven't done a whole lot of knitting for the past 2 weeks. Well, no, I have done a whole lot of knitting for the past 2 weeks, but I've been knitting almost exclusively on my Advent project, which is going to be its own video after Christmas. So I've been filming me opening my Advents and working on my Advent project all throughout the month of December. It's the 20th today, so we've got 4 days left of that. I will then edit that and post that hopefully the weekend after Christmas, so kind of 27th, 28th is my goal. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to edit yet though, because normally I film these videos as one chunk and then just edit that one video, whereas obviously that's going to be 24 different days of videos, but we'll see. But there'll be another video this year, but this is my last podcast. So I thought I'd treat it as a bit of a kind of, I do have a finished object. I haven't worked on any of my other whips though, other than my Advent project. So I thought what I'd do is talk a little bit about kind of reflections on 2024 and my crafting and making for the year. And then also some of my goals for 2025 and the things I want to kind of put out into the world and hopefully achieve in 2025 is the goal. So let's start with the FO. So I have finished the Hipster Hat by Petite Knits. So if you'd have seen my previous couple of videos, you'll have seen that I've been working on this. This is knit out of 100% Superwash Merino DK by Pigment and Ply, and the colourway was called The Girl with the Pearl Earring. And the Hipster Hat pattern is an all over 2x2 rib pattern. And mine's a little bit shorter than the pattern called for, because I wanted mine to fit like this, where it's kind of a bit more of a snug, almost fisherman's style beanie, rather than the actual pattern has a little bit more length on it. And I'm really, really happy with how this hat's come out. I am really chatty. If I show you, there's a good spot to show you. There we go. I'm really happy with how, can you see that there? No, there it is. I'm really happy with how the decreases have turned out. This is probably my neatest hat because I purposefully made sure that when I was doing the decreases, I did them on double point needles, and I made sure that the gap between was on the purl stitches so that they would already be kind of going back. Whereas if I did them on the knit stitches, I think you'd have seen the kind of looseness that I get when I change from needle to needle. I knit this entire thing on 3.5mm needles, circular for the bulk of it and then double pointed. I used Cowl glue for the first time and I was a big fan. And I actually got a bit of advice from, I cannot remember your name, but someone who's been knitting for like 60 years left a comment, and they kind of gave me some advice about some metal needles and some things to try, which was really, really helpful. And will probably save me money without having to go and try a load of things. I'm just going to kind of steal their experience. But I really love this. This is how much I've got left of the skein. So this used about, I think, 60 grams. The pattern says that you'll use most of a skein, but for the large size, there's two sizes, and this is the larger of the two. However, because I made it considerably shorter, I ended up with a a good chunk of yarn. It's not enough to make another hat, but it's enough to kind of have without it just being scraps. And that's the Petite Knits Hipster Hat. I think I will knit another one of these at some point with some different yarn, because I think it would be nice to have a few in a few different colours. And I think this pattern is a really good gift knit as well, because it's all over 2x2 rib. Obviously that looks quite small there because it comes together, but then I have quite a large skull and it fits me really nice, so I think I'd be able to knit it easily for other people without having to measure their heads as much. And yeah, and this is my third hat of the year. And I was really daunted by knitting in the round, and now I'm not so much, which is fun. But I don't really have anything else to say about this. I'm really happy it's done, and that will go with all my other hats. And that's it for finished objects. I mean, there's normally only one finished object, if any, but I don't have any WIP to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about 2024 and just my thoughts on the things I've made and the yarn I've bought and all those kind of things. So I'm going to also show some of the things that I've made throughout the year, because if you haven't watched before, 2024 is actually the year I learned how to knit. So I learned how to crochet at the end of 2022. I really started crocheting in 2023, and then in January of 2024 I bought my first pair of knitting needles, and I've then been knitting for about a year, and I'm really, really happy with where I've got to. I'm the kind of person that if I'm not good at something quickly, I tend to give up. And I persevered with knitting, and I'm really, really happy I did, because now I've got a craft that I really, really enjoy. And I said this in my last video, I obviously started as a crocheter, but I think I prefer to knit now. I think most projects, when I think about them, I think of a knitted project rather than a new crochet project. I still love to crochet, and I still have crochet projects on the go, and probably always will, but I'm really, really happy that I learned to knit this year. And I'm also really proud of a lot of the things I made. I've kind of purposefully been trying to learn new techniques throughout the year rather than just making simpler things, which I don't do with crochet as much. I kind of rest on some basics with crochet, but with knitting I've kind of really encouraged myself to try some new things. So I thought I would show you, because this is actually my last project. I mean, it won't be, my Advent project will be, but this is, one sec. Sorry about that. This is my last non-Advent project of the year. So I thought I would show you my first project of the year. I keep all of my knits, my finished knits, just in one of these Woolworths bags, because I have nowhere else to store them. So I do just have this big bag of knitwear that I'm going to empty out and kind of put in other places in other years over, and I think I'll do this each year and kind of keep it in a bag. I do wear things, and I do like take them out if I've worn them. I don't know where it's gone. Hold on. Oh, it was right at the top, that's why. I was kind of trying to dig around because I thought it would be at the bottom. So, this isn't the first project I started, but this is the first project I finished. I had a few false starts with knitting, because I tried to knit projects that I thought would teach me how to knit, but once I kind of learnt the basics, I got a bit bored and I didn't actually want the end project. So what I ended up doing, this was probably the third thing I started, but first thing I finished. And this is just a really simple boucle cowl. I knit it flat, round, and then I seamed it. The seaming's not particularly good. I did a crochet seam because I knew how to crochet and I didn't really know how to do any other seamings. So it seamed together just with single crochets. It's using boucle yarn, which was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. I've got some other boucle yarn and I think it's so pretty and it's so soft. I just think it's a bit of a nightmare to knit with for me. But maybe I wouldn't, to be fair, I've not tried since I finished this, so maybe it wouldn't be so much anymore now that I've learned to knit and I've become a much more confident knitter. But this is just a simple cowl, and it's too small to do twice. Actually, no, I'm lying to you, it's not. although that is quite tight. But if you had a smaller neck, it would be fine to do twice actually. I haven't ever worn this, and I don't think I will, but I love the yarn. This is another Pigment and Ply yarn. I got this in, they did like a January sale where you got like 3 mystery skeins. And it's really, really pretty. But my gauge is all over the place, and it seemed kind of randomly. So to get from here to here, I'm really, really happy. And all of the things in between I've been really, really proud of. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the project that I am most proud of. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and I think the project I'm most proud of is my shift cowl, my first one. This is not the most complicated thing I've made this year, but I think it's the most like, this was the first thing I made this year that made me feel like I was kind of like a knitter. Not so much because of the pattern, although I know a lot of people make this pattern and it's really popular, and Andrea is a really popular designer. I think it made me feel like a knitter because it felt like a proper finished object that I could wear, and I would wear this. I love this. It's also not like, it's an interesting yarn, it's an interesting shape, it's a slightly different construction, which meant I had to think about it a bit more. And I just really love how it turned out. I love the shape of it. And I see more shift cowls in my future. If you watched last week's episode, you'll know I've got a traveller cowl on the go, because I really like the shape, so I'm excited to see how that turns out. But this just kind of, to me, felt like the first thing I did, and it didn't take me too long to finish. It was probably one of the quicker things I made. And I'm just really happy with it. I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy with how it turns out. And even though there's a couple of mistakes in it, the seaming's not amazing, what I then did was I made another one using different yarn. And I managed to fix all of that. I managed to work out a better way to do mattress stitch. And I was a bit more confident with my slip stitches, so I could kind of fly through it. So, and making something twice feels quite accomplished, because it means you're not doing it to try something new, you're doing it because you just want something. And I'm really, really happy with that. So I'd say that's the thing I'm most proud of. What else isn't there? Maybe we can have a bit of a rummage through, because a lot of you will be new, so a lot of you won't have seen a lot of this. I'm really happy with this. This is my faded undulation that I made over the summer, kind of into the autumn, it took forever, by Stephen West. And I made this using some yarn by Bellica yarns? Was it Bellica yarns? Let me see. I've written it down somewhere. Let me just check. I think it is Bellica yarns, but one sec. Talk amongst yourselves. Yes, by Bellica yarn. So I used 4 colourways, well, 4 greens to make it. I really, really love this. I love the yarn and I love the way it's turned out. I think what this taught me is that I need to be a bit more conscious of the yarn I buy to make sure it's just kind of my style, because I don't think I'll ever wear this really. It's really, really nice, and the yarn's nice, and I like green. These just aren't my kinds of greens. And it also is probably the reason it took me 4 months to knit, because I just kind of got a bit bored of knitting the green because they weren't colours that excited me. So this kind of taught me a lot about being a bit more mindful of the yarn I buy, and buying yarns that I'm excited to buy and have, but also excited to work with when they're going into a big project that have a lot of needles. Not a lot of needles, a lot of stitches on the needles. But I am really happy about that. I was going to give that to my mum, but I've already wrapped all my Christmas presents and I haven't wrapped, it's not one of the gifts I'm planning on giving her this year. I'm not sure why. I think I kind of don't want to part with it just because I put so much time into it that I kind of want to have it, but maybe I'll give it to her next year if it does just end up sitting in this bag or sitting somewhere for a whole year, because I don't just want it to go to waste. I am still really proud of it. I'm really proud that a lot of effort went into it. The second project I made this year, and this is, I'm also going to make another one of these next year. This is the Clockwork. It's called a shawl by Stephen West, but it's actually, I think it's a scarf. I don't think it's a shawl at all. And it's just kind of knit flat, a kind of normal scarf. And I knit this again out of 2 colours of Pigment and Ply that I bought in that same sale that I got the Boucle in. And it's just a simple stitch, slip stitch. I think that's the wrong side actually. It is. It's just a simple slip stitch motif to kind of make all these almost bricks where you stripe the 2 colours in. I used a variegated and a solid for this. I think I wish I'd used 2 solids. I was just so excited to use the variegated. And I do really like how it's come out, but I think it would just look slightly more effective if it was purely 2 solids. And I'm going to make one of these next year for my boyfriend to have as just a scarf, because he doesn't have any of my knitwear. Not knitwear. I've not made him anything that he uses. I've made him a couple of blankets, but he just likes really soft, like chenille blankets, and the ones I've made him aren't that. So I think I'm going to make him a shift cowl next year, but I'm thinking of making it just out of 2 colours. So kind of just following the pattern and the stitch, but not using all the different colour breaks. And I'm thinking of making him one of these next year as well. So he's got a couple of scarves, because he's one of those boys that just gets cold all the time. So his scarves he'll use. But I really, really love this, and I really, really love the yarn in it. And the Clockwork, I think, is a great pattern. I think it's a good beginner pattern. It's a lot of needles, because you knit it long edge to long edge rather than short edge to short edge. So it's a lot of stitches, but it's just quite mindless. And I think you could probably adapt it quite easily if you wanted to maybe add some mohair or use a slightly different texture of yarn. I think that'd be fun. One thing I learned about this is the importance of a gauge swatch, because my gauge was way off, so this isn't actually the size it's meant to be. Even after blocking, it's should be slightly wider and slightly longer, so you live and you learn. What else do I have in here? I've got my Cowl, which a lot of you will have probably seen, because although I say that, I don't know who's watching this. Maybe you haven't. So this was this year's Cowl that I made. Really, really proud of this. This was almost my most proud make of the year, and it's the most complicated thing I've made this year, and I really, really love it. But by the time I got around to this, I was already a little bit more confident, so it felt a little bit more. The one thing I am proud of is just how much work went into this, and how successful it turned out, to be honest. No major mistakes, and learnt some good new techniques. Learnt to do short rows, learnt to do the bobble stitch, learnt to do... I already knew how to do brioche, but I did brioche like in a finished project. I learnt that I don't really like brioche that much, because it takes about an 8. I really love brioche, the actual finished fabric. But it just takes forever, because you're having to do like 4 passes to get so little movement. But I am really, really proud of it. And it's also made me realise I actually really like the shape of a semicircle scarf. I think it's actually surprisingly wearable. So I think I might make another of Stephen's semicircle, or anyone's really, it doesn't have to be one of Stephen's patterns, but one of his semicircle shawls, because it's actually, I'm just surprised by how wearable I find the shape. I thought it was going to be completely unwearable. Saying that, I haven't worn it, because it's quite wild colour-wise, and it doesn't really fit with my colour aesthetic, but that was kind of the point I was going for with this, to be honest. So, really happy with that as well. So I'm really happy with the knitting I've done this year. What else was I going to talk about? I'm just really happy that I've done this podcast, to be honest. If you know me, or if you knew me in real life, this podcast is a little bit random for me, just doing it. I love talking about things that I'm passionate about, and I will happily talk for hours about passions with friends and with family. But I'm also not the kind of person, like I don't really, and you'll know if you follow me on Instagram, I'm not really like a social media person. I don't like make posts and kind of do things like that. But the reason I started this, and I mentioned it a bit I think in my first video, is that where my boyfriend's autistic, he can't pretend to enjoy conversations with me about knitting. And I just found that I'd found this project and this craft that I really, really loved, and I just wanted to talk to people about it. And I'm really happy that we're here 16 episodes on, because a bit of me thought I'd maybe make 2 or 3 and then I'd like forget about one and then end up never making one again. But I didn't, and here we are 16 episodes later. There's a few of us here now. And I'm not like super into the numbers. I don't really care too much about kind of how many people are watching and what, but the fact that people are watching these and the fact that people are commenting and liking the videos is also really, really nice. It's really nice to kind of have this back and forth a little bit. And I'm excited for next year's. I'm excited for making more of these, because I make these every 2 weeks, so I've got 26 new episodes to make next year, which is fun. And we'll see what I make next year. But speaking of 2025, I thought I'd talk about some of my plans and some of the things that I've learned this year that I want to put into next year. The first one, which I spoke about slightly with the faded undulation, is I want to be a bit more conscious with my yarn buying. I've ended up with a quite large stack, considering I bought my first skein of hand-dyed yarn September 2023. So that kind of, 16-month period to now, I've ended up with quite a lot of... 1 second, I need to blow my nose. I'm back. So, what was I saying? So, yeah, in those 16 months since I started my hand-dyed yarn, I've just ended up with quite a lot. I love yarn, and I love all the colourways that all the kind of wonderfully talented hand dyers produce and kind of release throughout the year. But it means that I'm kind of constantly ending up with new yarn, which sometimes makes me forget about the yarn I've already got. And I want to use some of the yarn because I love the way yarn looks in a skein. I think it looked great. I love it so much more the way it looks in a project. I love it's knitted up. So I want to knit more and buy less next year, I think. And I'm not going to put myself on a ban or anything because, one, I don't want to miss out, I suppose. But also I don't want to restrict myself unnecessarily, because if I can afford it and I have room for it, then I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy to have a stash. I've got hopefully many years of knitting ahead of me, so having yarn isn't a bad thing. And I also like supporting small businesses. Like you'll see more about it in my Advent video, but I bought a bit last minute a Advent from the Crafty Bird, and there were some issues with postage, and she kind of sorted it out amazingly, and she was really, really generous and really like put a lot of effort into sorting that out for me. And things like that make me want to support small businesses like that and various small businesses, so I don't want to just restrict myself from doing that as well. So I think my goal is to, one, keep track of my yarn in and out a bit more next year, kind of on a monthly basis. I might make a spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet. I might just do it in a notebook, but I want to track that so I can be a bit more conscious and just aware of what's coming in and out. And then overall, I'd like to aim for me knitting with more yarn, whether I finish those projects or not, but using more yarn in projects than I have coming in. One of the things that is going to facilitate that is I'm going to join fewer clubs next year. So I joined 3 yarn clubs this year. I joined the Green Lapkin Yarns Secret Treasure Box Blanket Club, the Cool Woolings Mini Society, and the Lottie Knits Mini Fade Club. And all 3 of them sent me wonderful yarn all year. The only one that I had a project assigned to, though, was the Green Lambkin Yarns, which meant that by the time we got to, I ended up cancelling the other 2, the non-Green Lambkin yarns one, I think in September. And by then I had 50 mini skeins of yarn, which is like 10 full skeins of yarn, isn't it? Is that right? Yeah, it is. And that's just a lot, isn't it? Like 50 mini skeins. Did I have 50? Yeah, I guess I did about. So I'm now trying to do the maths in my head. So I'm planning on joining less clubs next year. You'll notice I'm saying yeah, less and not no, because I think I'm going to join the Green Lampkin ones again, unless it's like she's just going to release 5 greys every month or something, then I might not. But I've really enjoyed working with those, and I kind of want to do maybe a similar thing next year, just have a simple project where I'm just kind of throwing some really fun kind of different kind of yarn into one project throughout the year, and to always have something mindless on the go I think would be really good. I've also signed up for, and it's a full skein, and I signed up for it for the first month. I'm not sure whether I will do it all year. I might try and be good about dipping in and out depending on the mood boards. But Wool and Witch, who I really, really love the yarn of, and uses some interesting bases, is doing a yarn club next year that's nautical themed. And I think that sounds fun. And again, I might, once I've seen that, I might also try and put that into projects quickly. Although that is 100 gram skein, so actually no, I won't. But I think that might be the only 2 clubs that I sign up to next year, which is only 1 less than this year. So it's not, I've not made some kind of radical reduction, but I mean, baby steps, right? And like I said, throughout the year, I'm going to try and buy less yarn. There's only one yarn show that I'm planning on going to next year, which is the Southern Wool Show. And that will probably be the only one I go to because it's really the only one that's easy to get to. There's loads of others that I'd love to go to, but where I don't drive, that's the one that's kind of convenient. So I think I'll go there next year. And that will be, I think it's end of August, maybe early September next year. So I'd also like to maybe say, if I have money that I want to spend on yarn, I might start kind of putting it aside and then maybe buying things in person there. I'd also quite like to maybe go to some yarn shops next year. Specifically, I really want to go back to London because I've not been to London for ages, and I just want to do like a big shopping day in London. And there's quite a few knitting stores in London, so I might try and do those and then try and do more in-person shopping than online shopping. But also, who knows what all my favourite dyers are going to do next year. They might all release wonderful collections, so we might be sat, so it's an intention. I might be sat here this time next year telling you all about how I failed that and how I didn't meet that intention. But fingers crossed. I have done 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done 5 yarn advents this year. I did 1 last year, so that's gone up drastically. I don't plan on doing like 9 next year. I want to say that I want to do less next year because it is a lot and they are expensive and it's a lot of yarn, you know. But I think what I actually want to do is I still want to give myself the freedom to have as many advents as I want. To be honest, I don't think I'd do 5, and I don't think I'd ever do more than 5. It will probably be, I think maybe 2 or 3 is the sweet spot. I think maybe 2 would be great because I can have one that I'm working on, or maybe I could work on both if I had to. But really, I'll just have to see what kind of mood boards and what kind of themes people do next year. But again, if I buy less yarn through the year, I'm telling myself that maybe that means having more advents at the end of the year isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's never a bad thing. And I'd also like to use the yarn from this year's advent before next December 1st, I think is the plan. Not necessarily all of it, so I might not use all 20 grams of each mini, for example, but I'd like them all to go into at least one project so that I've got something to kind of show for each. And then I might end up, if say I use 10 grams of each, I might end up using the other 10 grams and like giving that away. I have this thought that I might make my mum an advent next year using some of my leftover 10 gram balls. Because she'd never buy herself a yarn advent. Yeah, so I might do that. So, which would be nice to kind of pass it on. But that's my thought. I feel like I've just rambled on for ages about my thoughts about yarn. I'm interested to hear what you would think about that kind of thing, as to whether you kind of feel like it's something that you need to restrict, or whether you're just happy to buy as much yarn as you can physically get your hands on. it's something that I kind of think about, and it kind of goes up and down. I think if I bought a lot of commercial yarn, which I don't very much anymore, I do still every now and then, but I think if I bought a lot of commercial yarn, I'd think about it differently, because that feels less supporting a small business and more buying a load of things. Whereas I think because these are small businesses and because I watch videos of people putting all the effort in, that transaction feels slightly different. But also there is a limit to how much space I can fill with yarn, and also to how much yarn I can knit with. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. I know it's something people talk about a fair bit, so it'd be good to hear what you think within that regard. And one of the other things that I'm planning for 2025 is I really want to hone in on and learn some more new skills. And I have 3 in particular, and I've actually kind of picked out some yarn and I have some specific intentions for all of them. So the first thing I want to learn next year is I want to learn cables. It was something I had on my list for something I'd want to learn this year, but I just kind of never got round to it, and there was never really a project that appealed to me with cables in it. And I still don't have the exact project in mind. However, I do have the yarn in mind. So this yarn is called Nordmanania. Oh, is it meant to be like a Christmas tree? Is it like a Nordman? Is that the vibe? I don't know. It's this really wonderful, solid, deep kind of teal green. It's very much green, but it does lean on that kind of bluer side of greens. I want to make a cabled hat out of this. So it's a deco wet yarn, 100% superwash merino. And I just think that would be really lovely. So I'm on the lookout for a pattern, and I think a hat will be a good way for me to learn cables, because it's a smaller project, so I can kind of get it done without having to kind of battle through. But also, if I make big mistakes, it's not so big that I have to rip loads back. Because I'm the kind of person, if I did a project and had to rip it back, I see people who like rip back whole jumpers and then just knit them again. I don't think that would be me. I think if I had to rip back a whole jumper, I would then never knit that jumper again and just put the yarn in a place that I don't have to look at. But I think with a hat I could make it. So I'm on the lookout for a pattern, but cables is the first new skill that I want to learn next year, because I think cables, one, are really timeless, but I think it also opens me up to then being able to put those in a lot of other fun projects, because I love a super variegated yarn. I love yarns like this, but sometimes I see colourways solids that I also really, really love, but I'm less prone to getting the solids because I don't have any projects in mind. Whereas if I had more kind of skill within the texture world, I think that would be different, because I'd be like, oh, I could make a wonderful cabled hat out of that, or a cabled scarf or jumper potentially. So that's my intention. I think this is going to be my next cast on. I'm going to find a pattern. It might be my Christmas Eve cast on, potentially. But we'll see. No, it won't, because I want something on Christmas Eve that I can just not have to think about. I don't want to learn a new skill on Christmas Eve. That doesn't feel very festive to me. But that is skill number 1. Skill number 2 is colour work. So this year I've done a few mosaic knitting projects, like my shift cowls, like these, where I suppose, like, technically you are, I think this does count as colour work. I've never really spoken to anyone about it, but I think I'd count it kind of as colour work. But obviously it's a very different skill to using 2 strands, to doing stranded colour work and using 2 strands within the same row. So I want to do that because there's so many fun colour charts and so many fun patterns where you can like make really cool things. I also think it's quite impressive looking. So if I can get it down, then next year's gift knitting is amped up a bit, because I can show everyone a skill that they'll think is insane. I mean, it might be really difficult, so it might be, but the project I want to learn on is nothing mad. I want to make a hot water bottle for my boyfriend. So I spoke about this a little bit earlier in the year, Part of my desire to use different yarn bases, which I've done a bit towards the end of this year and will continue on probably forever, led me to John Arbon, which is why I bought the Corridel yarn that I made my second shift cowl out of. But I also bought these swatch cards for the Knit by Numbers line, which is a 50% Falklands Merino, 50% Blueface Leicester yarn. And this is what I'm going to knit my boyfriend a hot water bottle cover out of in Colourwork. I just need to work out the pattern that I'm going to use, to be honest. There's loads of hot water bottle cover patterns. For a long time I was thinking about making my own. My boyfriend loves bats and my boyfriend loves rats, and I thought that made it sound like I had two boyfriends. The same boyfriend loves both of those things, and I thought I'd try and find a pattern that has both of those in, and then I thought maybe I'll try and make my own colourwork pattern. Maybe I'll find a couple of colourwork charts and put them together. I don't think my first colourwork project should be so Blue Peter. I shouldn't be trying to make something up on my own, I don't think. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick colours I think he'll really like, or maybe just colours I like and then he can use it, and knit him a colourwork hot water bottle. But I also really love having this watchbook. I'm considering, I need to work out the yardage, but I want to see about potentially using one of these colourways as a main colour to go with my Crafty Bird Advent, which I won't talk about much here and I'm going to show you in the video, but I want a solid colour to go with it, and I think potentially that it's a different base, but I think it might be quite similar, like density and like yardage or meterage. I say yardage, I don't really know how long a yard is. But that's technique number 2. And again, like with cables, that then opens me up to a whole world of other projects where I can try new things and learn different things. And I think these swatch cards are just quite fun to have, to be honest. Sometimes I just like looking at them, which actually, now I've said that out loud, makes me sound a bit weird, but I do just sometimes like looking at them. I think the Knit by Numbers like concept is actually so clever, and there's some really wonderful neutrals in here with some of the lighter, like I think that kind of lightest mustard there would go well with a lot of different yarns as kind of a neutral colourway. But it's probably a bit dull just sitting here looking at me looking at swatches. So that's technique number 2. Technique number 3, which isn't really a technique, is more of a project category, is I'd like to make a fully wearable. I'd like to make a jumper-esque, t-shirt-esque thing. And I think the project that I'm going to do, I think is going to be the Toaster Tee by, is it Rebecca? By Creo Knits, I think is what they go by as a designer. I think their name's Rebecca. My mum's just knitted one of the Toaster vests and she said she found it really straightforward, really easy to follow. It's kind of the first, I think it's the first knitting in the round project she's ever done. I think she's more used to knitting panels and then seaming together. But I kind of encouraged her to try a knitting in the round because she always complains about purling. And I think she really enjoyed it. So I think I'm going to knit one of those as well. Not the vest, I think it's the Toaster Tee, so more of a t-shirt. And I think this is going to be the yarn I use it for. This is a project bag, not yarn. But a year ago, was it a year ago? It was over a year ago now. I bought a bunch of Knitting for Olives pure silk. My mum, for my birthday, got me a gift card to a yarn store, like an online yarn store. I cannot remember what it was, where I got it from. And I could not work out what I wanted because I was looking at buying potentially some mini skeins or potentially some like sock yarn, but I just didn't, at that time I was only crocheting, so I didn't really have any projects to use that kind of yarn in that came to mind at the time. then I saw that they were having a sale on Knitting Frolic Pure Silk. And the fact that it's pure silk intrigued me. The colourway is called Cardamom. And it's a really, really wonderful neutral. And I bought a lot of it. I think I bought 9 skeins. And you get quite a lot of meterage in it. So it's 250 meters for 50 grams. So I've got just over 2,000 meters, I think. It's quite a fine, I think, do they class it as fingering weight? They might class it as fingering weight. It's a light fingering. I don't know if that's going to focus. There we go. It's a light fingering. So I need to do a lot of maths, but I've done some basic maths, and I do think I have enough meterage here. I'm obviously a big boy, so I'm planning on making that. I did already start a project using this yarn, and this is what I bought the yarn for. And I feel like you're going to think I'm silly when I tell you what I bought this yarn for. I originally bought it so that I could make, let me fold this so you can see what it is, so that I could make a hexy cardigan. This, I was using a 3mm crochet hook on. This is obviously, I suppose, maybe big enough to fit a small child currently. I can't tell you how many hours this took. It's so slow. So, and then also, as I was getting going with it, especially once I started knitting, I also just kind of realised more and more that I actually just don't want this. Like, I don't think I'd ever wear it. I don't want it. So, I haven't had the heart in me to rip it out yet. They also come in these donuts, so I think I need to like rip this out by caking it up rather than just ripping it out, because I think it would get tangled really, really easily. But I think next year I'm going to use this yarn to knit myself a toaster tee. Wearables scare me a little bit because there's just, I also love this bag actually. It came with Pigment and Ply's Advent last year. I think it's really fun. I've also just been using this as a storage bag all year, and I'd quite like to get it back as a working project bag, which is another reason I want to use the yarn in it. I actually might transfer this yarn to something else so that I can start using this as a project bag. I might do that after I film this. They just kind of daunt me a little bit, wearables, mainly because of the sizing. Like, if I knit a scarf, or if I knit a shawl or a blanket, there's only so wrong the sizing can go. It cannot be the size you wanted, but a slightly shorter scarf is still a scarf. A slightly smaller blanket is still a blanket. A slightly too small t-shirt doesn't fit. But I think I just need to kind of bite the bullet, take it slow, be quite methodical and not just kind of cast on because I'm bored. I want to do all the gauge swatches and all of that and all the maths. And I think by this time next year, I'd like to be able to film next year's last video wearing a toaster tee using this yarn. I think which gives me a whole year. I don't want it to take a whole year because that feels boring, but it at least gives me a full year to do that. And those are the 3 kind of new skills that I'd like to learn next year. I'm not going to limit myself to those. I'm not going to kind of say no to any other new skills, but that's really where I'm at. In terms of non-knitting skills, I'd also like to learn to cross stitch next year. I'd like to have that as a little extra option for those evenings where I don't really feel like picking up a whole project, but I can just kind of do a little bit of cross stitch, a slightly different hand movement to keep me in. I have asked for a couple of cross stitch kits for Christmas for my family, so I will either get them and then do that, or I will maybe then have to look and buy myself my own. I tend to do, if I ask for something for Christmas and I don't get it for Christmas, I then tend to in early January just buy it for myself. Not everything, like if I asked for something that's like a little bit bougie, then I wouldn't, but those kind of like £20 to £30 kind of gifts, I just buy them myself because I'm like, well, I wanted it when I asked for it in October, so I still want it in January. So I'd like to learn to cross stitch. I'd like to do a little bit more sewing. I don't really want to do anything drastic with sewing. I just want to use all the fabric I bought to sew with. And I think I want to turn it into project bags. Just so I, one, have more project bags if I need them. But also just so that I've done that and used the project bags. Because I bought a load of fabric thinking I'm going to make all these project bags. I made one and then realised that sewing just doesn't scratch the itch that other crafts do. So I'd like to do that. I don't think I'm going to learn to spin next year. Originally my thought was I was going to learn to spin next year. And I might do still. But I don't think I want to invest in something that requires another form of material yet. I think I want to maybe get a bit more confident with knitting, maybe work down my stash a little bit, and then maybe 2026 I could look into buying some fibre potentially and spinning products, because I also don't have a wheel or anything. I'm not going to buy a wheel straight away. I'm not going to do drop spinning ever because I think, or drop spindling, because I think that looks awful. Not the finished project, I just don't think I'd enjoy doing it at all. So I think I'll buy an e-sprinter at some point, and I might buy one next year if there's like, if I see one and there's a good deal. And maybe that'll prevent me buying yarn, because I could spend the money on an e-spinner rather than on yarn. But I don't think I want to then start buying fibre until the year after. So maybe 2026 is the year of spinning for me. But you can see if that becomes true, because it might just be that I get big into spinning next year and then you can all just call me a liar afterwards. But that's really all my thoughts on 2024 and on 2025. I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are on the same topics. So let me know what you're proudest of making this year. Have you learned any new skills? Did you learn to knit this year as well? Are we both on the same knitting journey timelines? And then also, what are your plans for 2025? Are you trying to buy less yarn? Are you trying to buy more yarn? That would be fun. Maybe 2025 is your year of just treating yourself. Let me know. Leave me a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, a bit of a different one, bit chatty, bit more, I mean not back and forth because you're a camera currently, but a bit more chatty. I've only really shown you one new thing. But I've enjoyed it, so if you enjoyed it as well, a like would be wonderful. If you want to subscribe before the end of the year, that'd be great, and then we can see where 2025 takes us and beyond. Hopefully the world doesn't end in 2025, but you just never know these days. This could be the last video I ever make. That was a bit morbid actually, that's a morbid way to end it. This won't be the last video I ever make. Like I said, next week you should get my Advent video, looking back on the whole of December and all my Advents and my Advent project. And then I will see you for my first video in January, which will probably be 3 weeks from now probably. But we'll see. I'll just see when I feel like filming for my first video in January, and then we'll pick back up every 2 weeks. So I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope you have an even better New Year, and I will see you in 2025.